Welcome to Pathways Through the Prairie. I am State Librarian Mary Soucie, and today I'm talking with Dani Kappel, who is the State Library's Library Services Director. So Dani oversees the division that includes our library development folks who go out and help libraries, and then our cataloging staff who make sure that you can find the materials in our collection. Dani has worked at the State Library for just over 2 years. However, Dani originally worked at the State Library in 2015 in the cataloging department. So I have known Dani for 10 years now. So Dani, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
Dani, the vision of the State Library is providing pathways to knowledge and opportunities. What was your pathway into the library world?
When I was growing up, my mom would take us to the public library once a week. She always emphasized literacy and education. One of her goals was to make sure that me and my siblings could read really, really well. So that was kind of when I fell in love with reading and with the library. But I never really thought about going into librarianship until after I got my undergraduate degree. So I graduated in history. So I knew I was going to grad school. And so it was just kind of a question of what I wanted to do at that point. So I investigated pretty much everything you could do with a history degree as far as grad school goes. I thought seriously about going into law school or becoming a librarian. So those were kind of my two options. I picked librarianship because I thought it would be a little less stressful than being a lawyer. And I thought maybe I would get to read more interesting things than just law. So that was kind of what led me there.
That's very interesting. Did you have a goal with your history degree, or you always saw history as a stepping point to an advanced degree?
My parents were of the mindset that you need to just get a degree. And so I feel like a lot of elder millennials had parents that sort of pushed that on them as well. And so they were just like, you need to be educated, you need to get a degree, we don't care what it's in. And history has just always been interesting to me. When I was a kid, I always read historical fiction. I loved it. And so I decided to get my bachelor's in history. I loved taking history classes. I did consider doing graduate school in history and maybe teaching it on an academic level, but you just have to pigeonhole yourself so much in a specific historic, era or event or time period. And I knew that I didn't want to do that there wasn't any specific historical event that I would just, love for the next 20, 30 years of my life that I would just want to study.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is there a historical period you're more drawn to than others?
I like modern history, I guess, a little bit more than older history. I was drawn to UK history for a while and English history. But other than that, I went through different phases where I was really into World War II, I was really into World War I, I was really into the Vietnam War. So I guess wars maybe.
Okay.
But even just U.S. history in the 20s and 30s is really interesting.
And is that what you mean when you say modern history?
Yeah. So yeah. Basically.
So the 19th and 20th century, or the 20th century, I guess, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. That's kind of a newer term to me, modern history. And I was like, that seems almost like an oxymoron, because history doesn't seem to be modern. But when you put it in that framework, that totally makes sense. And what is it about the 20s and 30s that draws you in?
Oh, I took a 400 level history class on the history of the 20s and 30s. And so it was really interesting to read kind of, first of all, you had the Great Depression and all of that kind of stuff. Roosevelt and all of the programs that he implemented during that time were really interesting. Even just how he ran the country during that time was really interesting. And then during the 1920s, you essentially, some historians theorize that this is when you saw the birth of the American teenager. Because prior to this, teenagers would be working when they were really young, and they maybe didn't get a childhood, or they maybe didn't get a teenage year.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden, kids weren't working anymore, and they were able to be teenagers, and so that's where you get flappers and jazz and that kind of stuff. It was the very first generation of rebellious teenagers.
I did not realize that. It makes sense if you think about it, though, because prior to that, they went right to work.
Yep.
At very young ages. My grandfather on my mom's side only graduated 8th grade, and then he went to work. He worked for one of the New Deal programs, actually, and then he ended up, he was a janitor at the Chicago City Hall for the rest of his career. And so, yeah, it makes sense that, then that next generation came along and they didn't have to start working when they were, 12.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and now you fast forward, and not that, it's only 100 years later, and there's I call them kids, which someone told me once, when you start to call 20-year-olds kids, you've hit old. But now, like some kids graduate from high school and they take a gap year where they don't do anything. They don't necessarily work. They don't go on to college. They don't start a trade program. They just kind of have a year to just be. And that's only 100 years. That's pretty significant difference in 100 years if you think about it.
Yeah, it's crazy, which is also one of the things that interests me about modern history is just how much it changes, even from just generation to generation.
Sure. I was talking recently with my nieces and nephews, and cell phones came up. And my nieces and nephews are all 16 to 27, so they're in that age range you're talking about. And I had said that when my very first, it wasn't even a cell phone back then, it literally was called a car phone, and it was in a bag that you could only use when you plugged it into the car lighter. That was 1993. That's not that long ago, and now I have a computer in my pocket.
Yeah.
So that I wish I had appreciated history more when my dad was alive, because my dad loved history, and none of us really did. And I think I have such an appreciation for it now that I think of the conversations I could have with my dad, both about the current world we live in, as well as, the history and the museums. I love to go to a museum now with my dad because I just see it through such different eyes than I did when I was younger and didn't know any better. Did you find that your history degree and your library degree work well together, or was it two completely separate, different programs?
I thought that they worked well together, particularly just the research aspect, because when you are studying history, you're doing a lot of research and you're studying different types of sources, primary, secondary, all that kind of stuff. So when I came into library school, the two things that I really liked about it was the research aspect, and also how much the profession itself kind of defends like the First Amendment. So when I was thinking about law school, what I was mainly thinking about was constitutional law, because I think our Constitution is amazing. And so I think, like, in general, it's just the most influential document of modern history. So it was kind of fun to be able to, I guess, nerd out on the First Amendment while I was getting my library degree as well. So that was kind of cool. I thought it was almost kind of like an even mix. Mm-hmm. I actually thought about law librarianship for a while. I did my practicum at the Colorado Supreme Court Library, but I would have to get a JD on top of my MLIS, and that just seemed like way too much money and way too much school. Right. To probably make about the same amount that I would make with just my MLIS. And
so for listeners who aren't familiar, can you define MLIS and JD?
Oh, yeah. JD is a Juris Doctorate, and so that's what you have to get in order to be a lawyer. MLIS is a Master's in Library and Information Science.
Great, thank you. Law libraries are, I would think, I've never worked in a law library, but I think that would be interesting to work in one. The information you would get to research would be more than, like when I was a public librarian, I was doing some research and helping patrons with their research, but not the same level of research I would think that you did at a law library. So what did your internship look like?
It was really interesting. They basically didn't have a barcode checkout system. So for a really long time, the head of the law library did not have a library degree. They just had a Juris Doctorate. And so they really didn't know how to run a library. So it was almost interesting to see like how different it is. Because when you become a lawyer, you know how to research. They teach you how to research. Like you're really, really good at it at that point. But it was just kind of the other librarian aspects that they didn't really understand or get. So my big project when I was doing my practicum was kind of organizing their collection and assisting with the whole barcoding process and getting it on their ILS. So
How long was your internship?
3 months, I want to say. It was one summer.
Wow, that's a huge project to get done in this. You must have just started it.
I did. I started, and mainly I kind of assisted with it, I guess. They had already had the process that they were going to do, and so I just helped a lot.
Gotcha.
But
And when you first worked at the State Library, you worked in cataloging as well, so you must have a love for cataloging.
I actually really do, which is weird.
No, I mean, it is not my love, but I know a lot of people that do love cataloging, and you have to have good cataloging to have a good framework for people to find our materials. Do you feel like your cataloging love is at all tied to your love of history?
I guess I never thought about that. I saw my cataloging love as more of a tie to I just love to learn. And when you catalog, you just look at the most random materials and you learn the most random things. And so that was always kind of fun when I was cataloging here. Mm-hmm. So there are still like random fun facts that I remember just from what I cataloged here. So, yeah.
What do you think people would be surprised to learn about the State Library collection?
I think just in general, all of the state documents that we provide access to that they could actually check out. They don't have to go to a specific archive and sit in a reading room and, maybe only bring in a pencil and a pad of paper or whatever the archive's rules are.
Sure.
And so they could actually have access to some of these older materials.
Mm-hmm. And again, for listeners who may not be familiar, what is the State Documents Program?
So the State Documents Program, basically the North Dakota State Library is mandated through Century Code to keep 2 copies of all state documents that are published.
For the public, intended for the public.
Intended for the public.
So any document that a state agency makes for the public, we have a copy of.
Yeah, and so we are mandated to keep a copy of them, and usually we keep 2. We keep a permanent copy and then a loan copy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they go back to the territory days, which I think is really cool. And so for someone who's a history buff, that could be fun to just kind of wander through state documents and see what's in the collection. And of course, we don't necessarily let the public just wander through. They have to search the catalog or ask one of our staff to help them. But there's still some really neat historical documents in the collection.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
What has been surprising about working at the State Library? Either the first time or the second time.
Well, I know this might initially sound bad, but I didn't really know that state libraries existed. When I was looking for cataloging jobs after I got my MLIS, the North Dakota State Library came up, and I was like, oh, state library. Like, does Colorado have a state library? Because at the time I was living in Denver. And so I researched that, and I was, oh, we do have a state library. How come I haven't really heard of these before? But yeah, I applied for the job, and I ended up getting it. And so I moved to Bismarck, and it's interesting to see how much information and help there is out there. I think one of the things that people in our country maybe don't realize is how truly transparent our government is. If you want to find any type of information about state government, city government, federal government, it's out there. It's open to the public. You can find it. So I think that was probably one of the bigger things that surprised me.
Sure. And if you can't find it, we can help you find it.
Exactly.
That's what we do. There is, in fact, a Colorado State Library. Each state in the country has a state library, as well as several of the U.S. territories. So the Northern Mariana Islands, for instance, has a territory library, as does Samoa. which is in this, both in the Pacific. I was just telling someone this recently. The former territorial librarian from Samoa, whenever he would come to the mainland for a conference or a meeting, when he would have to go home, he'd have to hang out in Hawaii because, they only fly to Samoa like once or twice a week. And I remember saying to him once, such a tough life you lead. You have to hang out in Hawaii for 4 days. And finally he looked at me and he said, Mary, me getting stranded in Hawaii or having a layover in Hawaii is like you having a layover in Minnesota. It's like, oh. He said, I also live on a Pacific tropical island. Fair enough.
That's fair.
And I think that's one of the things that I love about state libraries is I literally know someone in every single state in the country. And we get to interact with them and connect with them. And there's certainly similarities among state libraries, but there's so many differences in how we serve the people that we serve. And that's one of my favorite things about working in a state library. What is your favorite thing about working at the state library?
I would kind of agree with that. I like that part of my job now is kind of thinking about how we can help North Dakota libraries as a whole and trying to execute those ideas. I actually really enjoy just kind of thinking about that and coming up with those ideas and getting other, staff members or other librarians' opinions. And so it's always fun. It's always fun just talking to librarians, hanging out and talking to librarians.
Some of my favorite people in the world are librarians, so I agree with that. And not all state libraries do, but we work with all library types. So what are the different types of libraries? Because some people may only think public library or school library, but there's other kinds of libraries that we work with.
Yeah, I think that is something that the public isn't really apprised of, just like they don't necessarily know the existence of state libraries. So we work with school libraries, academic libraries, tribal libraries, prison libraries. There's a medical library. Is it in Bismarck?
There's several medical libraries
Yeah.
throughout the state. So there's one in Bismarck, there's Grand Forks, there's Minot. There might be a couple others.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And so it is really fun and interesting to be able to work with all different library types and try to figure out how we can help them serve their communities better.
I agree. And then we also serve state employees.
Yes.
And then we serve North Dakota citizens as well. So for people who aren't familiar with the state library, anyone in North Dakota can get a state library card. That was a law that just got updated this session, so it'll go into effect officially August 1st, but we've been operating that way for a long time. So it's nice that practices in law now match
coincide.
up.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Has there been anything surprising about working in a state agency versus you have a background in public libraries, you have a background in school libraries? Do you see, is it similar? Is it different?
I would say working in a state agency has a little bit more bureaucracy, which, I mean, it's just a bigger entity, like you're trying to cover the entire state of North Dakota. So you need to make sure that things are done properly and equally and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I understand the reasoning behind the bureaucracy. One thing that I really like about it is I feel like there's just a lot more training on the bureaucracy. When I was a public library director, I really feel like there wasn't a lot of higher up training. I didn't have any official procurement training. And I was looking to buy a new bookmobile for my public library, and I had no idea how to write an RFP. I had no idea, really what I was just trying to research it on my own and figure it out. And so it's kind of nice working with a state entity that kind of takes the time to make sure that you are trained in what you need to know. So
we have a lot of resources to help us.
Yes.
With other state agencies, which is also, I agree. That is nice. Whenever I talk to librarians, I never ask what's your favorite book because we just can't. There's no such thing as one favorite book when you're a librarian. So instead, I always like to ask, what's a book that you've read recently that you've enjoyed sharing with other people?
That one's hard too. So I'm still a big reader. I've been reading more modern fiction lately. So I read Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And it's essentially about 4 siblings, and they had a very interesting childhood, and their dad abandoned them, and they were raised by their mom, and their dad was also kind of famous at the same time. And it just kind of goes through their childhood and then their adult life and what they're doing. And I don't know, I love the way Taylor Jenkins Reid writes. So
Good. Sounds like good characterization.
Yes. I'm all about character development in books, I've realized. That's kind of my main focus. So
I love good characters, and I love to read books that make me think. I have a better appreciation of history, I have a better appreciation for nonfiction, which some people are like, you're a librarian, you should love nonfiction. But when I was younger, I didn't love nonfiction, but I'm getting a better appreciation for nonfiction now. But I do still love a good, cozy mystery series. And that's my fave to read. So,
I actually thought about a different author, and he's gonna be at NDLA or whatever. Neil Shusterman, and he writes sci-fi, YA sci-fi, but his books are amazing.
Okay.
So I actually do recommend them to pretty much everybody.
I was just last week with a group of school librarians in Wyndmere, North Dakota, and we were talking about the North Dakota Library Association, or the NDLA conference this year, and through the support of the Glenn Perkins Foundation, we received a grant, and so we have some additional dollars for speakers. And so I was talking about the speakers, and I missed mentioning Neil Shusterman, and the school librarians were all over that because they are super excited that Neil Shusterman is going to be at the conference, whereas I'm excited about Laura Numeroff. If you give a mouse a cookie, I love if you give a pig a pancake, if you give a dog a donut, she's got a whole bunch of books. So I'm super excited about some of the authors. And I think that's one of the other cool parts of our job, that, we get to meet authors kind of on the regular. And I absolutely love that as well. Is there anything you miss about being in a public or a school library?
I like what I do now a lot better. There are little things that I miss, but it's mainly just the individual people that I worked with more than anything else.
Sometimes I miss the direct interaction with a lot of patrons. I think probably what I miss the absolute most, though, is the access to all the newest books. When I worked in a public library, like, I could walk out of my office and there in tech services or cataloging were all the books we had ordered, and I'm like, ooh, hold on that one, hold on that one. And now I have to be intentional about my favorite authors. But I absolutely love working in the State Library as well. I feel so fortunate to be here. So, Dani, I'd like to conclude these by asking someone to share their elevator speech, if you will. What's one thing that you hope that listeners of this podcast take away about the North Dakota State Library?
I hope they check it out. If they have not, then they should, because there are a lot of really cool things that we can offer. So,
excellent. And they can reach us how?
Online. They could come in. We're on the state capitol grounds in Bismarck. They can call. They can email. So, all the ways.
So our website is www.library.nd.gov, or of course you can just Google North Dakota State Library. I'll echo Dani's invitation. Please come in and see us. It's I'm not sure when this is going to air. I think it's going to air pretty quickly, though, and so we are heading into summertime. So I'm going to go off script a little bit and take a moment to do a commercial for our outdoor gaming kits. So we have a collection of outdoor games, and they include bocce ball, croquet, ladder ball, rollers, oversized dice to play Yardsy, so Yard Yahtzee or I don't know, do we call it Yarkle? Yard Farkle? I'm not sure what we call that. And anyone can check those out. If you are in the Bismarck-Mandan area, we're open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. Or if you are listening to us from across the state, you can check them out. We will mail them to you. You do have to pay to mail them back. And it's you can guesstimate about $1 per pound for mailing. And the weight is included in the catalog record. So have kind of an idea of what it's going to cost to borrow one of those if you're not in the Bisman area. But Dani, it has been so much fun to get to talk to you today and to get to know a little bit more about your journey into the library world. So thank you so much for joining me on our podcast, which is Pathways Through the Prairie. And thank you, everyone, for listening.